Ladies and gentlemen, it is Kevin Tompkins, it is Britt, Flinn, it is Andrew Cooper. It is Lightning Round, of course, powered by Fantasy Alarm and Better Sports Network. Guys, how we doing? We are on the precipice of rookies reporting to training camp. We're on the precipice of full-on training camp, hard knocks, everything. How we doing?
Doing good, man. I will say with the Hard Knocks, the Jets are trying to resist, clearly. And the funny part of the reactions to it, though, is that you see the people come out and say, oh, the Jets are saying, we're not going to cut people on TV, and people are disappointed by that. It's like, come on now. You that desperately want to watch somebody get fired?
It's a little heartless.
Yeah.
There's a lot of crash TV out there that we can watch. I don't think we really need it with the NFL, but I will just say this. I have never watched 1 minute of Hard Knocks. It's not my bag.
It used to be great. Here's the real trick is that it used to be
great.
You
know what the best better than Hard Knocks was that all for nothing or all nothing show that it was on Amazon, I think. They did like the Cardinals, they did a couple other teams.
Well, teams do their own right now, and you can pull just as much info from those. Like I watched the Panthers one after Corey Parson told me to watch it. I watched the Cardinals flight plan. Like those are all on there, and honestly, it's the same because nowadays all the teams can nix whatever they want from HBO stuff anyway. So you might as well just watch the ones the teams are making, But it used to be right. HBO was just there, and the teams had no say. Now they have a little more say.
Yep, exactly. So today, actually, before we do that, obviously we have the Fantasy Alarm draft guide. Coop, why don't you go in depth about, what we've got as far as the draft guide, what we've got coming up, what you can expect going forward as we do get into training camp here, as we do get into really the meat of the offseason, what we're waiting for preseason games.
Yeah, honestly, with the Fantasy Alarm draft guide, you can get right now everything that you need to draft because all the rankings are in there. My rankings, Howard's rankings, all the linear rankings. I also have my own dynamic rankings, which are basically
my dynasty rankings.
Your dynasty rankings are in there. The dynamic rankings are yin and yang rankings for every position. So everything you need rankings wise is in there. We also have a lot of the concept articles out there. You have Kevin Tompkins's 0 RB article, Britt's Anchor RB article, all sorts of wide receiver stuff. John and Pemba's QB tiers. My tight end stuff is dropping soon. So that's all in there. And we're going to continue trickle stuff out and update stuff. So if you go in there right now, $26.99, you can get just a draft guide. That's pretty much all the football content we have coming out from now till the season. But the better deal, honestly, is just to become a Fantasy Alarm member. Right now, we have it set up where if you go in, sign up for Fantasy Alarm, use promo code COOP, you get 50% off the first 6 months. And you get 7 days where you can go in and check everything out. Check out the Discord, check out the rankings, check out the articles, see if you want to be part of the member full time. And you get all the baseball stuff, all the NASCAR stuff, all the DFS stuff, all the baseball and basketball and hockey dynasty stuff. So you get everything with the All Pro. That's the better deal. It's like $20 a month with the discount. So that's the way to go. But if you just want the football guide, that's there too. But it's all available. We're going to talk about some of the stuff today. So give you a little sneak preview on the show.
Yep, absolutely. We're going to be talking about running backs today. Last week, we did talk about quarterbacks with the great Marcus Grant, so check that out if you have not. We will be going through positionally next week, wide receivers. We got a great guest, Pat Curran, the $2 million man himself, coming on to talk about wide receivers next week. So we're going to be very excited about that. And then 2 weeks from now, tight ends. I'm sure we'll have a great guest. Have not lined that up yet, but we will. But let's talk about running backs, the topic of the day. Obviously, running backs very near and dear to my heart, not so much in the first round, second round, third round, fourth round. But let's talk about these top end running backs. We know our own John and Pemba, Mr. Austin Eckler himself. If I was going to tie any person to, as far as a brand, it is I'm going to take Austin Eckler no matter where I am in the draft. And he did that in our mock draft that you can find at Fantasy Alarm too. He took him at 103. So it got me thinking about, we're talking about these running backs when in a very wide receiver heavy top of the draft. Is Austin Eckler, he finished as RB1 last year. Is Austin Eckler really that harebrained an idea to take over Christian McCaffrey?
I'll go first on this one. And I'll tell you that. So obviously we got to give Impemba his flowers for last year because he sat there. And while everybody was saying, oh, do I take Christian McCaffrey? or McCaffrey's going to get hurt, so I'll take Jonathan Taylor. And Pep was just saying, hey, in full PPR, I'm taking Eckler at 1. And he did that in a couple drafts. One draft that I was in with him, that was a draft with all elite fantasy gamers for Billy Muzio's video series there. And we just barely came in second, right? So, and Pep was all over it. But I'll say this year, I'm a little scared. There's two things that scare me, especially if you're drafting right now. If you're drafting right now, I'm staying away just because I still look at last year where that team had the Jaguars against the ropes, couldn't run the ball when they needed to run the ball. And that's how you win those games in those situations. Austin Eckler, as great as he is as a pass catcher, he has more receptions over the last 4 years than Deebo Samuel, which is crazy. They've both been in the league for those over that 4-year span. He has 50 more receptions. So this guy's catching a lot of balls, but they likely need to bring in an extra guy for those early downs. I wouldn't rule out Zeke coming into play with Kellen Moore, and Kellen Moore himself is the other issue. We know Joe Lombardi loves to dump it down to the running back. He did it with Alvin Kamara with the Saints. He did it when he was with Reggie Bush and Theo Riddick with the Lions. And last year, he fed a ton of balls to Austin Eckler. That's why Justin Herbert had such a low ADOT despite having so many passing yards. I think this year we might see Eckler. I mean, I would never project him for less than like 60 or 70 targets, but is he going to get over 100 after they go out and they drafted a wide receiver to go with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams? A little bit nervous on that. I don't know. I mean, like, I'm not going to move Eckler down farther than 3, but I can't take him at 1 right now. Britt, where are you on that? Can you take him at 1 at this moment?
Yeah, I think that I could. You mentioned that, he couldn't get that 1 yard in the playoff game, but when he gets the amount of targets that he does, that's all we care about in fantasy football. And in the small sample size that we saw Christian McCaffrey play with Elijah Mitchell, Mitchell actually had better rushing stats. He went 18 for 89, 9 for 59, 7 for 39, and 5 for 55, compared to 1438, 739, 1132, and 10 for 45 for McCaffrey. McCaffrey's upside was based on that target share and what he can do out in space. But if Mitchell comes back healthy and eats into that bell cow role that we've seen from Christian McCaffrey, I think that Eckler can absolutely outscore him. The crux really rests on whether or not the Chargers bring in another back or if they go with Eckler as the bell cow once again. But right now, I think that it's Eckler's show.
Yeah, and Eckler's a different kind of bell cow, not in a bell cow in the natural sense where you're expecting a guy to get 300 carries. That's never been Eckler's game, never will be. I mean, 206, 204 carries the last 2 years. That's about the max of what we can expect from him. But the fact that in 16 games, he's played 16, 10, 16, and 17 games the last 4 seasons. In those 16 or 17 game seasons, he's never had less than 94 targets. So even in an offense where now they had Quentin Johnston, I would say Keenan Allen's pretty well insulated in that offense. You can say Eckler is probably the 1A, 1B, however you want to spin it, but it's going to be more Mike Williams kind of battling with Quentin Johnston as far as who's going to be that third target. I mean, they all can eat. It's a great offensive environment. You had Kellen Moore in there, Justin Herbert taking another step up this year. So I'm very intrigued by how that offense is kind of meshed together. But the things that we can't set in stone, Austin Eckler and Keenan Allen, and Austin Eckler being at least 90 targets. We know he's going to flirt with 1,000 yards. He's never reached it in his career. Nobody scored more touchdowns the last 2 seasons than Austin Eckler either. So we know he has that kind of equity. And the thing that's benefited him is the fact that they don't have that backup running back. They have Josh Kelly. They've been trying for years with the Isaiah Spillers and the the Larry Roundtrees of the world. Yeah, it's just stop trying to make RB2 happen with the Chargers.
I'll say this. If they don't bring in another back, then I'll definitely be high on Eckler and I'll be very high on Justin Herbert, because having a running back, not having that, goal line grinder or even just a guy, a plotter, like even if they bring in Zeke, not having that guy really makes the running back an extension of the pass game. And that's how you got all those crazy seasons from Drew Brees. It was that instead of run plays, they're just doing little flips to Alvin Kamara, and he gets those points too. So having that RB as the extension of the pass game is awesome.
Yeah, that was the next question I was going to have is, are they a sneaky spot for one of those free agent running backs to land with, whether it's the Fournette, Hunts, Zeke Elliott? So I think that's an interesting kind of dichotomy there, where if one of those guys lands, I don't know if he's going to eat too much into Austin Eckler's, upside, so to speak. It may hurt the touchdown equity. I think that's where he would be hurt with them bringing in somebody from the outside. But as currently constructed, I think you can still lock in Eckler for almost 1,000 yards, at least probably I'd say 90 to 100 targets, maybe more, and double-digit touchdowns. So I think with that, all in totality, I think you can make the case for Eckler. I don't think he's any worse than RB2 though.
And he doesn't want the ball less. He wants more money, right? Like it's not like he'd be content having somebody else take some of that workload away. That's
right, or be managed.
He's not that kind of guy.
Yeah, exactly. Now let's talk about the next running back off the board, which is I shouldn't say controversial, because it's really not, because from what we've seen in the past with running backs that are rookies being drafted in the first round, we know Bijan Robinson, currently RB3, never played a snap, whatever. We want to throw the generational tag, we could do that too, but we know premium picks in fantasy that are rookies, Saquon Barkley, Leonard Fournette, Ezekiel Elliott, we've seen them thrive. And then Clyde Edwards-Helaire, clearly an outlier there as far as, the kind of back that he is, going to Kansas City, which may have kind of influenced that fantasy, like where we had to take him about 106, 107 a couple years ago. Do we have any concerns, Britt, about Bijan going this high, knowing that he hasn't played a snap, or just kind of the offensive environment in Atlanta pretty insulating him toward, what we think is going to happen, getting 300 carries, such a run heavy offense. We know Arthur Smith puts together a really good offense for a running back to be able to thrive in.
Yeah, I think that you're drafting him kind of close to his ceiling, but there's no doubt he's going to get that volume to put him close to the top, if not as the RB1. And Dan Malin in his offensive line rankings, that is also part of the Fantasy Alarm Draft Guide, actually has the Falcons offensive line ranked as 5th overall. So if they improve that much, they're going to run it down people's throats. Last year, their offensive line was not great, but they did a lot to improve that. And Bijan also has receiving upside, so you could get the best of both worlds between the volume and the targets. And I'm really not opposed to taking him where he's going in drafts.
Yeah, they really leaned into the run game, right? They brought back, they brought back Caleb McGarry. They brought back Chris Lindstrom. They brought back Keith Smith at fullback. They
drafted Matthew Bergeron too.
Drafted Matthew Bergeron, traded for Johnny Smith. Like, they are loading up on it, man. So, and here's the thing. If we're talking about the data and the trends within this league, and everyone's saying that, okay, running backs are undervalued and teams aren't drafting them as high, and the older guys get nicked up more and they fall off a cliff earlier. If we're considering that entire narrative, shouldn't that be an argument in favor of Bijan Robinson? The fact that this team went out and drafted him as high as they did, and he's a young guy without a lot of wear and tear, and they already had somebody that they could have used, but they went out and got him. So that's why when everything lines up exactly like that, and you know me, Kev, like, I'm the number one fader of young rookies. I'm the guy that pours cold water on everybody. But in this instance, like, with a running back going this high, I'm in. With a tight end like Dalton Kincaid going to the situation he's in, I'm in. Normally, I'm out on all those type players. But this year, when conditions are perfect, I'm way in. So in this case, I'm willing to take Bijan. Again, it's CMC and Eckler 1 and 2, but I'm willing to take him at 3. And on most sites, that's the case. The one site in our composite ADP, you can find that over on Fantasy Alarm, available to our members. The one site where Bijan isn't going 3 is, of course, Yahoo, where the more casual gamers are playing. On FFPC and NFPC, all where like the expert gamers play, it's Bijan at 3, but Yahoo, they can't get rid of the pass. So Jonathan Taylor is the 3rd pick over there.
Yeah, so Coop, you're trying to tell me that you're now into young, sexy running backs and players. You mean like information has changed?
Just information, man. New shit has come to light.
It's come to light, man. I tell you, like, if conditions are just right, then I'm in. But a lot of times, I'm out. In this particular case, I'm out. Like Quentin Johnston, where he is on that target pecking order, it's really hard to make arguments for a guy like that. He has to be special, or a bunch of guys need to get hurt. But Bijan, man, they gave him the keys to the car immediately when they drafted him where they did. So I'm in. Any concern about what Dustin brings up in the chat? Dustin here saying that someone needs to explain why everyone thinks Bijan's receiving upside. He didn't really do that in college.
It's because of the reports coming out of rookie minicamp and the OTAs. They were apparently using him everywhere. Everybody was talking about how good he was as a receiver. And if that's happening before training camp even starts, then we know that he's got receiving upside. We don't have to see it. It's already happening.
Yeah, like I'm fine with Bijan. I'm fine getting in on the ground floor with him, even at this price, because the ceiling is clearly 101 next year in 2024 for him, as long as he does what he thinks he's going to do. We know the Falcons are going to run the ball into the Paleozoic age, so I don't think we have any worries there. And if Desmond Ridder can just find some efficiency with these wide receivers, with the Kyle Pitts, Drake London, it's only going to help that run game even further. So, I mean, a lot of it really hinges on Desmond Ridder, because if you're not respected as a quarterback as far as being able to drop back, I mean, Bijan Robinson's going to see 8 in the box all the time, and he like Derrick Henry, who saw a very high 8 in the box, rate. He's had one of the higher rates the past few years. Bijan Robinson is a good enough runner where he can kind of still circumvent that and get his. So I think it's interesting, but I think Desmond Ridder being at least moderately competent is going to help the run game just in totality. I mean, I talk about it all the time where I think Arthur Smith is kind of a donk, but the one thing that you have to give him his flowers, that's going to be our phrase of the day, is the fact that he can put together a competent run game.
Yeah, and Britt said she just lost sound. I'll also add this, Dustin, that people said the same thing about Jonathan Taylor, that he didn't really catch much and he wasn't going to catch much, and they had Nyheim Hines. And Nyheim Hines in those first couple seasons, I mean, Nyheim Hines came out, had 57 targets in the year when Jonathan Taylor was the RB1 overall in fantasy football. So, like, even if they mix in, I don't know, what are they going to mix in, Cordarrelle Patterson? Is that what you think they're going to do? Like, even if they mix in Patterson or Algier, like, is that guy going to command 60 targets? And just like with Jonathan Taylor, is it going to matter? Like, because with Jonathan Taylor, it didn't matter at all.
Yeah, actually, Cordarrelle Patterson, I've been drafting him a lot in basketball just because reports are coming out that he might be playing more wide receiver this year. I don't think he really has to play that gadgety running back, or as our good friend JB Barry would call him, fake running back. I don't think he has to do much of that this year, with now that they have Bijan, now that they have Tyler Algier. I think Caleb Huntley's still kicking around somewhere, but yeah, so I think obviously they need a wide receiver right now. It's Scotty Miller and I don't even know.
Matt Collins came
up.
up.
Matt Collins, yeah, our better Allen Lazard, Matt Collins.
Yeah. So yeah, he should be Bijan's going to be good.
Lock him up. Going down a little bit further, we're literally going down the line here with RB4 through RB7, because I feel like there's more questions about this group of running backs than there's ever been. Nick Chubb, Browns offense, they could pass a bit more with Deshaun Watson, a full season of him, if he is not what he was at the end of last year. And, even if he's not what he was in Houston, at least somewhat close to it. But even then, maybe he's not the biggest lock to carry some of that receiving work that now departed Kareem Hunt had before. Jonathan Taylor, still a good option. Has some touchdown risk, I would say, depending on how many games Anthony Richardson does play. Saquon Barkley and Tony Pollard have volume locked up, but Barkley is a holdout risk, and Tony Pollard's coming off a broken fibula. So I do think that there are a lot of questions about those guys. I don't know. What do you think about just those situations and having to draft them at the end of the first round?
Yeah, the problem that I run into with Nick Chubb is that I love Nick Chubb. I love the fact that he's got the backfield to himself now. He's got the keys to the car. I love the fact that if you look at pretty much every draft, every sports book, it's like DraftKings, for instance, they have Nick Chubb set as with the highest over-under for rushing yards. A lot of them have him with the highest odds to lead the league in rushing. So people are looking at it and saying, okay, like the real difference maker is, can he be a guy that gets 50, 60 targets? He did get 49 one year. And that was with Kareem Hunt, the year that Kareem Hunt missed the first 8 games and came on. But so I think it's entirely possible. The problem that I run into is it always seems like there's somebody else that loves Nick Chubb and takes him in the first round.
He's been rising a lot.
He's been moving, yeah. So maybe that's because we always draft with Fantasy Alarm members, and Howard Bender always steams up Chubb. There's always
The
one-
normies are coming back, and they're like, Nick Chubb, no Kareem Hunt, hell yeah.
So, I mean, it's honestly sometimes this game doesn't have to be hard, right?
By the way,
fantasy
don't clip
football-
that. By the way, don't take me out of context.
Well, nah, we might have to, because fantasy football doesn't have to be hard. Like Nick Chubb is awesome. That line is still awesome. Last time I checked, like Joel Bitonio is still there. So I'm in on Nick Chubb. I just need to figure out where I'm comfortable drafting him. I actually kind of realized that I need to move him up a little bit because I don't get him. I don't end up getting him. It's hard to get him at the beginning of the second round. So I think I need to move him up into that swing range where if I'm picking at 11 or 12, I just say, hey, I'm going to get Chubb here and then figure the rest out in the second round.
Yeah, I absolutely love Chubb. I always have. I think that he is the best pure runner in the league, even over Derrick Henry. And last season, he got over 1,500 rushing yards and only played 57.7% of the snaps. I mean, even if this offense is more pass happy, there's no Kareem Hunt. He's going to get a little bit of that work. He's going to eat. And honestly, I think that this could be one of the best seasons of his entire career.
Browns could be good.
Look, here's the thing, because me and Nick Chubb have been kind of, I don't want to say oil and water, but maybe some like vinaigrette and water. Don't quite mix, but I found myself in spots where I would take Nick Chubb. Just it's really about price, especially in best ball, where I like Nick Chubb, but I like running backs later just as much as Nick Chubb. So why would I take the top guy when I can let the next guy that I like just as much?
And
Well,
then
Because he's a league winner.
and then you don't get any of them, which is what you wanted all along.
Britt. We're not playing this game
Nick
today.
Chubb has brought you a lot of engagement, at least, Kev, right?
He has. He also got like a 5-minute Bender soliloquy on Sirius too. That was fun.
Right. Yeah. Now
So-
Nick Chubb he's been the quintessential really good football player, but not super high end fantasy player. And I think this year it might be possible for him to be both. That's all.
I think so. No, I think that's definitely in his range of outcomes. I have never not said that Nick Chubb might be the best pure runner in the NFL. Like I think that's
So
No doubt about it.
I know you like guys later based on ADP, but let's say Nick Chubb does fall, right? And this is a half PPR league hypothetically, because underdogs half PPR, right? There's
Right.
a lot of half PPR leagues. So let's say this is a half PPR league and you're staring at the end of the second round. Actually, you know what, Kev? Let's get crazy. It's the beginning of the third round. You already have 2 wide receivers and you're sitting there and it's Chubb or Tony Pollard. Who do you like?
I like Pollard, but I think I would probably take Chubb. Honestly, I think he would be way too big of a faller to be able to not get him there.
Chubb or Ramondre Stevenson?
I've been falling out of favor a little bit with Ramondre. I would go Chubb.
Chubb or Josh Jacobs?
Chubb.
See, so it is ADP based, because if he was there, you would take him, but he just goes, and this does happen. He goes, I've seen him go in the first round, but he usually goes mid-second, so he doesn't make it down to the swing where you feel like you're getting a better deal. So I feel you on that, Kevin. Maybe you're not as low on Chubb as you think you are. It's just you'd much rather take those wide
I
receivers.
still like Taylor over him though, and I still like Barkley over.
I have it that way too. And that's the problem that I run into, is that if you like Barkley over Chubb, you are almost never getting Chubb unless you take Barkley in the first round. It's like
Exactly.
Conditions need to be perfect. Not to mention, I'm sure you would take guys like Waddle, for instance, over Chubb if he was there.
I take Devonta Smith over Chubb.
Yeah. So
unnecessary-
that's why you're never getting Chubb, dude. 'cause
I
you're
am
taking T.
unnecessarily
Higgins.
high on Devonta Smith versus the field. So
Yeah.
that's hardly ever happening. But I like to say I've shown some growth. I have drafted, I think I'm at like 5 or 6% Nick Chubb. I think I'm like just slightly underweight on the field in best ball. I
Look
mean,
at you go.
yeah, and if I take 2 wide receivers, then that's the thing. In a season-long league, these running backs are going to be skewed even higher than an expert draft or like a industry draft or anything like that. Those running backs are going to be pushed up, so it's never going to be in a range where I feel comfortable taking a guy like that.
I've got the numbers for you based on the composite ADP over at fantasyalarm.com. If you're a member, you can access this using and if you're not a member, sign up, use promo code COOP, get 50% off your first 6 months. But we keep the ADP up there. We update it every single day, and we keep the ADP from both sites like Underdog, but also the high stakes fantasy gamers and the casual gamers, because you want to know what's going on with everybody. So for high stakes, we'll have like FFPC, NFFC, and then like RT Sports is kind of a mix of both. And then Yahoo, of course, is a little more casual. Nick Chubb's ADP, if you look at FFPC, which is their contest, is $2,000, and it's not that many teams. So your odds are pretty good. Winner gets $1 million. He goes at pick 19 in those. Whereas on Yahoo, where your hometown boys are still doing mock drafts for some reason, he goes at pick 11. So he's at back end of the first round pick on Yahoo on sites like FFPC and NFFC, where it's kind of tournament based and you really only want upside. He goes pick like 18, 19. So just keep that in mind. If you want Nick Chubb in your hometown league, then you're probably going to need to take him at the back end of the first or anywhere he goes in the second. Like any second pick, you just need to take him there because he's not going to make it back to you.
Exactly. And then let's talk about let's talk about Tony Pollard, because we're talking about all these running backs now that we got Tony Pollard. I think there's less questions about him. It's really only the fibula that he has to come back from, but we know there's a possibility of Zeke coming back. We'll go to the resident Dallas Cowboy fan, Britt Flinn, here with this. Are you higher? How do you have these 4 running backs? We're talking about Chubb, Jonathan Taylor, Barkley, Pollard. Are you higher on Pollard than some of those other guys? Or are you kind of wary, a little bit, not wary, but concerned that A, another running back might come in to spell him, B, the fibula injury?
I'm concerned about his durability and his carry volume, because he's never in his career carried over 200 times in a single season. And now you've got Malik Davis, who, showed some little hint of a spark last season, but wasn't that great. Then you've got little pint-sized Deuce Vaughn back there, which, as good as his story was, I don't know how well he's going to fit into an NFL offense. And then you've got the ghost of Ronald Jones and Rico Dowdle. I mean, I worry how much abuse that Pollard can take. And he's never really been a between the tackles guy. He's excelled when he's run outside and when he's taken those short passes. I just worry, especially coming back from that ankle injury, that he's not going to be at 100%, or if he is, he's not going to be for very long.
Yeah, Britt. And that's the big thing with this injury, like the broken fibula here, is that people seem to think that when it's a broken bone, quote unquote, they tend to treat it like it's a broken finger or like a broken wrist, even, where it just heals and then you're good. But this particular leg injury is actually the result of a high ankle sprain. So what happened with him is his ankle got twisted, where a lot of guys, it just does damage to the ligaments. It got twisted so hard that his bone actually broke. And the solution to that issue is called tightrope surgery, right? Which, guys like Mac Jones had it. You seem
Cooper Kupp.
Cooper Kupp had it. But there were guys like Julio Jones that, it didn't go according to plan, so some of these times where, and what's involved in that tightrope surgery is they literally put a screw into your leg or a series of screws into your legs. So anytime you have that happening, you could have situations like Julio Jones, where he had one in his foot and it broke mid-season, or like Marquise Brown. And long-term, what ends up happening is sometimes they have to take these screws out and then he misses time next offseason, or there's a lot that can go wrong anytime you're doing surgical procedures like that. So I do have some concern long-term for Pollard. Anytime they're taking, fixing broken bones and twisted ligaments by surgically adding screws, right? So that's why, for me, when I look around at those crews, I'm probably going to have him at the end of that group. That said, we have to see how it all shakes out, because you look at Ramondre, what if Dalvin shows up, right? You look at Josh Jacobs, what if he's serious about holding out? So there's a lot that can go wrong in that range, and it's why I have Chubb in a different tier, because I'm not even sure what could really happen to Chubb. I don't think Kareem Hunt's coming back. I'm not really too worried about Jerome Ford. So Chubb for me is just he's on another level than that group.
Yeah. Speaking of Jerome Ford, Jack in the chat asking, what kind of percentage do you see Ford getting in that backfield? Like, I think the best case scenario for Chubb is he's getting 65-70% of the snaps, and then Ford is going to kind of fill in. But I think Chubb has a pretty much a stranglehold on 3-down work there. But who knows? I mean, we don't know. He might want to get. I'm sorry. Stefanski might want to manage Nick Chubb just a little bit. So I think Ford could sneak in there. I just don't think it's going to be anything, that's substantial. Nothing to the degree of where Kareem Hunt was mixed in. Let's get that straight. I think Jerome Ford is purely a contingent play should something happen to Nick Chubb. I actually did a late round running back targets where all of those running backs in that kind of from like RB20 to RB65 all the way down to Clyde Edwards-Helaire did a write up on all those guys and how to kind of play them with other running backs with archetypes. So go check that out on Fantasy Alarm in the draft guide as well. I did do a write up on Jerome Ford as well.
Britt, do you concur? Because I know you've been kind of leading the charge on Jerome.
Driving that train.
Yeah, I'm with Kevin. I think a 35 to 30% snap share is probably what we're going to see. But I definitely liked him more in best ball because of those spike weeks and that goal line work that he can possibly get. In redraft, like Kevin said, I think he is just more of a handcuff contingency situation.
Bingo, for sure. And now really we talked about it a little bit, but that's part of the 2-3 turn. In most drafts, we've got that glut of the Ramondre Stevenson, Derrick Henry. Just a big, just kind of mishmash of silly putty that is Ramondre Stevenson, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, Breece Hall. I know a lot of these guys have their warts as well. Jacobs might hold out. Derrick Henry now, has DeAndre Hopkins next to him. So that could, at least maybe build up some more efficiency. I got to say, I think I'm taking Derrick Henry out of all these guys. Age be damned. I think the dude's just a dog. Now, I don't think the Titans are going to be that great of big of an improvement with DeAndre Hopkins. I know Britt certainly thinks otherwise about the Titans per her tweet a couple days ago after that trade. But I do think that the Titans at least find a little more efficiency with DeAndre Hopkins having finally a bona fide number one target that's an established targeter. And then having Treylon Burks, having Chigakonkwo. I am taking Derrick Henry out of these guys. If I have Jefferson and if I take another wide receiver, if I need an anchor, take it Derrick Henry. Don't quote me, please. I have a brand to protect.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to go even higher on that. I am higher on the Titans now that they got DeAndre Hopkins because now you have to respect the pass. You can't just stack the box and be like, oh, well, they're going to run Derrick Henry. Oh, there's another Henry run. And the last time that the Titans had like A.J. Brown and Corey Davis, both of them almost hit 1,000 yards. And Derrick Henry still had over 2,000 yards because it balanced out that offense enough that defenses weren't able to scheme against it. And with Mike Vrabel, as good as a coach as he is, I have no doubt that they're going to continue to do the same. And I think that this Titans team may make a run for the AFC South now.
Yeah, my concern for Henry was that he would get traded somewhere, and it comes with uncertainty. And if he did get traded, he'd miss out on the best part of his schedule, which if you look at his schedule, especially for underdog, where we want guys in the last few, you got to string together a number of weeks. He's got the Texans week 15 and then the Texans again week 17. So two of those
the thesis of the play.
2 of those last 3 weeks. And honestly, the Jaguars, everyone loves them now. They're becoming a better team. That's the week 18 game that doesn't matter. So they actually miss out on at least one of the matchups that was going to be bad for them. I mean, they get the Falcons, they get the Bucks, they get the Panthers, they get the Colts, the Seahawks. There's not a lot of powerhouse defenses on their schedule, right? Even the Chargers, Bengals. There really isn't, when you think about the top teams on defense, Eagles, 49ers, they don't play any of those teams. So their schedule isn't actually that bad. And now that we know that after they signed DeAndre Hopkins, they're playing to win, that we don't have to worry about him getting traded off that squad. So Derrick Henry feels pretty safe to me now.
Yeah, that's the trickle-down effect, because now with DeAndre Hopkins, we know that unless something catastrophic happens to Ryan Tannehill, Will Levis ain't getting on that field.
No.
So now that Tannehill's going to be there, now that DeAndre Hopkins is there, it's only going to help Derrick Henry as far as at least this season's security and knowing that he's going to be there and he's going to be I would say probably at worst a 7-win team. They're going to be in the mix for an AFC playoff spot, but I've just never been that big of a Tannehill guy. At least the last couple of years. Now that he's got a bona fide weapon, I think he's draftable. I don't know if about in season long, where I think he's more of a watch list guy, where if you have to pick up a quarterback and he's going to be out there, he's like 2022 Matt Ryan. I feel like maybe without so much of the downside. That's kind of where I have Ryan Tannehill, but for Derrick Henry's sake, I think he's a lock over that group, with Breece Hall coming back from his injury, Ramondre Stevenson. I do have some questions. How do you guys feel about that? Do you guys have any questions about Ramondre Stevenson? I'll go with Coop because he is the resident Patriots fan. Having to kind of take on more of that receiving role, almost out of necessity, it seems like, because they were so hurt, with Ty Montgomery, and then having to bring in the Kevin Harris's, Pierre Strongs of the world. Did they use, that receiving back? Does that take some of the upside off of Ramondre Stevenson? Like, how do you feel about that kind of?
I have an article coming out on this exact thing today. It's already with the editors now, just talking about how the Patriots have now moved into the top spot odds wise for Dalvin Cook. There's only essentially 3 teams really in the running based on the odds. There's every other team is 1,500 or higher, $100 to win 1,500, except for the Patriots at plus 150, the Dolphins at plus 200, and the Jets at plus 400. So what that honestly tells me is even if he doesn't go there, it means that they're thinking about it. They're thinking about who's going to be our James White or Danny Woodhead or Kevin Falk that they've had pretty much the whole time. Last year, Ty Montgomery, week 1, played 20 snaps in the backfield and had 4 targets, right? Like they kind of were shaping up to use him a little bit like that. Pierre Strong probably as a rookie he wasn't ready, right? Like he didn't have the scheme down, and that happened to James White. James White himself only had like 14 snaps like as a rookie. Damian Harris was a healthy scratch for the entire rookie season. Like that's kind of what they do over there. So I think that if it's not Ramondre Stevenson, without Dalvin Cook there, I'm not going to move him from the second round, but I think there's room for a potential second guy to come in there and get meaningful work, whether it's Ty Montgomery, who running back coach Ivan Fears thinks it might be, or former running back coach Ivan Fears. I actually I played high school football with his son before he went to UMass. Yeah. So Ivan, great dude. But he says that he might be Ty Montgomery, and then beat writers like Evan Lazar are coming out saying what we're saying, which is the more fun player is Pierre Strong, because he has he runs a 4.37, 99th percentile speed. Like that's the dude right there. So we're rooting for it to be Pierre Strong because that's more fun, but don't be surprised if it's Ty Montgomery. And let's just hope it's not Dalvin Cook, because that would be annoying for fantasy football.
Yeah, I really need to add the Ty Montgomery stuff into the Andrew Cooper bingo card.
Well, Howard Bender already said that it's a $50 fine every time I say his name, so that's money in the jar. Hopefully Howard doesn't listen to this one. His internet's actually down today, so hopefully he missed this one. Nobody tell him.
Look, Dustin, as one of 2 people last year who drafted Ty Montgomery in Scott Fishbowl, I will not allow Ty Montgomery slander on these airwaves. As also a former Green Bay Packer who had 10 receptions in a Thursday night football game where they wore all white against the Bears. Thanks.
Yes, he was. I mean, at one point it was Ty Montgomery. He was good that one year.
2016, I believe.
Yeah. Because he was a wide receiver, and they were like, "You just play running back now." And he was like, "All right."
Yeah, they were. Oh my god, literally everybody got hurt.
Everybody got hurt, and they were like, "All right, you're running back now." It was so funny that year to watch him because I believe he's been number 88 or some. I think it's 88.
Yeah,
and just watching a running this like 6'3" running back line up number 88 and just kind of take the ball and scoot around with it. But he was pretty effective. He could get through there.
Yeah, I think it was like Andy Benoit from Sports Illustrated who said running backs who wear wide receiver numbers are a disadvantage or something like that, and it should be abolished. I don't know if you remember that.
That's true. It just doesn't look right.
It doesn't. But now that we've got every running back wearing like 1 or like 4, like Dalvin Cook, or
and people are wearing zeros.
It's all out of whack now. Back in my day, our tight ends were 89.
Kyle Pitts wearing 8. I mean, it looks nice, but it ain't right.
It really is. Let's go to someone maybe I haven't been so high on, but the rest of this podcast has been. Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon now, his ADP really hasn't spiked like I thought it would be. I think we'll see that correction more in season long drafts now that we know he's going to be there. There is a little bit of suspension risk still with Joe Mixon, but still, knowing that he's in an efficient offense, what's behind him besides Chase Brown and Travion Williams? I think if he sticks around and drafts a little bit more in best ball, I will draft him no problem. I just don't know about season-long drafts where he might go a little bit higher if he goes into like the middle of the third round. I think I'm still maybe hesitant because you're still maybe in the back end of that last year we were talking about with the Josh Jacobs possibly holding out Ramondre Stevenson, Breece Hall. But Joe Mixon, as far as the actual profile and the offense he plays on, there are certainly worse picks. We know he wasn't that efficient last year and had that huge 50-point game in the middle of the season. But I'm fine with Joe Mixon this year. What do you guys think?
I still don't really like him. I just don't like that 3.9 yards per carry. And I know that he's probably going to get more opportunity with the absence of Samaje Perine, but just that inefficiency and the fact that they were talking about cutting him early on in the season and then the suspension risk and things like that. I think that there's better players to take in that range, and especially wide receivers. Like, just draft an anchor running back and then take your wide receivers where you're getting Joe Mixon. There's a lot less risk there. And if you remove that 55-point game, he wasn't all that great.
Can't remove that.
It is in the record books.
You can't remove those points, can't remove those touchdowns. That's one thing I will not do. I will say that I'm not drafting him at, like, obviously with the 55-point game, at points per game, he was RB6, which, that was a little higher than where he was the year before last at RB7, which he didn't have 55-point game in that year. So I don't know how that was possible, right? Because everything was the one game. This guy, for me, I just look at what the team wants to do. They want everybody to buy in. They want everyone to take a discount. Joe Burrow says he will. T. Higgins says he will. Jamar Chase already said that Joe Burrow will, which means if he is saying Joe Burrow is going to take a discount, then Chase, of course, you got to imagine he will. And they want Mixon to. And then he did. And now he's going to be there. He wants to be there the next 2 years. And this guy, people told me that in 2021, the year before last, that you were a fool if you take these guys in underdog, right? And then a dude won $500,000, and his three running backs were Zeke Elliott, Joe Mixon, and Devin Singletary. He couldn't have picked more boring running backs according to the Spike Week community, and he beat everybody else. So that narrative, to me, I'm not worried about it. I'm looking for as many guys that can be every down backs as possible. So Joe Mixon, when I look around, and even in Yahoo and all these other leagues, he's still going the same place, pick 47 or so, which is late fourth, early fifth. I start looking around, and there really aren't guys that are even capable of anyway being the RB6 or RB7 in points per game, whether that's with a 50-point game or not. It's not even in the range of outcomes. So I'll take a guy where, he could be RB12 or RB13 if he doesn't have those games, knowing that he might have those games because that team is awesome. And sometimes running backs on awesome teams just score touchdowns even when they don't deserve them. I've seen LeGarrette Blount score 18 just because he's hanging out with Tom Brady while he was catching only 7 passes. So if that team's good, whoever starting running back is, I want him. So Mixon, I'm in on it. I get all the arguments against him. And you know what? Hey, 50-point game, you know what that is? That's a spike week. And isn't that what we like?
Coop's sitting here like, la, 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 still taking Joe Mixon.
Still taking him, dude. Still winning.
Yeah, if that spike week had been in a different week, I think maybe we would change your tune a little bit, but
it always works, dude.
Spike week is a spike week, I guess.
If Gabe Davis
but we're not
Cooper.
saying the same thing about Mike Evans and his 44-point spike week in week 17 last year.
Because Tom Brady's not there anymore.
Week 16, everybody who had him got knocked out.
If Joe Burrow wasn't with the Bengals anymore, then we would move Joe Mixon down. Just like Tom Brady's not with the Bucks, so we move Mike Evans down. Joe Mixon is with the Bengals for the next 2 seasons.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like this year and last year. Like last year when he did have Tom Brady, He knocked everyone out of the playoffs in week 16 because he put up single-digit points, and then that spike week came in week 17.
Well, he had a
Like
bad
I don't
game.
like betting on spike weeks. I like consistency.
Well, that's underdog. That's what they tell us. But Joe Mixon has he's been fairly consistent over the last 2 years. He's not been terrible. Like, and they improved the offensive line too. So I give him enough credit that, hey, he's going to be there. He's going to be the starting 3 down back for one of the best teams in the league. It's kind of hard for me to move him into the 7th round.
Guys, I just want to say that we're arguing about the wrong running back.
What do you want to argue about?
Who do you think?
Miles Sanders.
The guy that you had the cursor on in our show doc?
He's awesome. I'm not in the show doc. I've never read a show doc in my life.
Hold on, I'm seeing if this icon is you right now.
It is now. Now I am.
I mean, you don't have a crown on your head, but
I should have gone mine in there. Yeah, I'm on there right now. There it is. Let's talk about Miles Sanders. Britt, how do you feel about Miles Sanders?
I think he's going to be great, and I think that he's going to be great. I think that they are going to utilize him as a pass catcher as well as an every down running back. I think that with a rookie quarterback, your best friend is a good running back to kind of balance everything out. I think that they've improved that offensive line, especially with run blockers. Ike Ekwonu was one of the best run blockers in that entire draft class last year, and now he has another year under his belt. The only reason that Miles Sanders gets crapped on is because he didn't score any touchdowns the week or the year before. And then last year, he was just in a rotational committee because of the system that he was in. Now that the system's changed, I think that he's going to be awesome.
I'm there with you. Like we said a million times on the show that he played with a team that doesn't throw to the running back. Not to mention Nick Sirianni, especially, didn't even call the plays, right? Doug Peterson, 2019, called 39 screens to just Miles Sanders and Boston Scott. Last year, Miles Sanders and Boston Scott combined for more snaps than they did in that season, and they combined for 6. He just wasn't even calling the play. Like they weren't even calling the numbers, right? So with a new and you look at Frank Reich when he was with the Colts, he called 40 screens to just Nyheim Hines and Jonathan Taylor. So that's what I look at. I look at, is this guy going to get the high leverage situations? If it's a if it's a pass interference in the end zone, they bingo card that. Is he going to get that goal line touch? Yes, he will. If it's a 3rd down, are they going to pass it to him? Well, Scott Fitterer came out on video and said, hey, we like that time that you had 50 catches. Let's do that again, right? So I look at a guy like Joe Mixon, who was on pace for 90 targets last year, and I'm in. I look at a guy like Miles Sanders, who the coach says, hey, we like it. We like the way you catch the football. That's why we brought you in, to catch the football. Sign me up for that. I don't care that, he had 5 yards of carry because of his RPO and all that stuff. He could go down to 3 yards of carry. Don't care, as long as he's getting the targets and scoring the touchdowns. I'm not worried about his yards per carry. Just like Austin, I don't worry about Austin Eckler's rushing yards. He's never had 1,000 rushing yards, and he's always been awesome. I just want Miles Sanders to get the passes that the GM and the coach and him sat at a table and said that he's going to get.
All fair arguments for Miles Sanders. Look, I'm not going to come at it with a specific player take about Miles Sanders. I am a bit worried about the Panthers' just viability for this year, being able to get him some touchdown equity, because even though DraftKings does have the Panthers for 7.5 wins this year as the over-under, just the collection of spare parts that they brought in, I don't think this, and a rookie quarterback or possibly Andy Dalton, I don't think that this team is going to be winning a lot of games. If I'm going to place a bet, it would be on the under of 7.5 wins. I'm just not sure that Adam Thielen, DJ Chark, Jonathan Mingo, who are all question marks, they're not like, I mean, Thielen was a solid proven commodity in a different offense. Now goes to Carolina, clearly in the twilight of his career. Hayden Hurst, now add Miles Sanders to that, who I think is probably the best skill position player of that group, I will admit. Where he's going in drafts, I just don't think it's a good time to be taking the running back when you have those wide receivers there. But I have drafted a little bit of Miles Sanders just because I do think that he could get that 3rd down role, or 3 down role, I should say. And I'm taking Chuba Hubbard as a bit of a contingency, but Raheem Blackshear has actually done some stuff in camp too. I think that makes that more ambiguous, which that could actually benefit Miles Sanders. So,
Raheem Blackshear. I think you make a good argument for betting the under on the Panthers over under if that's how you feel about the team. Like there is certainly some uncertainty there, but the way I look at it is
it's just it's the team environment. It's where you have to take Miles Sanders in relation to other position groups in fantasy. I think maybe there's less of an I think it's more of an argument to not take Miles Sanders in best ball. I think in season long, where you have to start him knowing that he could get, certainly a lot of carries. I think he's more valuable in season long.
So here's the thing. As Britt pointed out, she's pointed out a couple times on this show and the morning show, like Josh Jacobs came out of the RB dead zone, even on a bad team.
He could be Josh Jacobs. He could be Josh Jacobs.
Well, I'm saying that last year I was fading Josh Jacobs because we all thought they were going to split the backfield, right? Like you think that it could be split with Chuba Hubbard and Raheem Blackshear. But if it came out on video last year that the coaches went to Josh Jacobs and said, hey, we want you to have 50 catches, then I would have moved Josh Jacobs up because we were trying to guess what they were going to do. And if you guessed they were going to use Jacobs as the guy that they paid him to be, a lot of money, then to be the every down back, then you would have guessed right? They just went out, paid Miles Sanders made him the highest paid free agent running back. They said on video they're going to get him the ball. Like for me, that's enough for me to say, okay, how many guys left can be 3 down backs? After that, there's a couple guys I still like James Conner or Rashad White. I think that those guys are pretty good players. And the main arguments I hear from people like JJ Zacharyson, who I've talked to this about, he says, well, I like these other guys better. To which I say, you can still draft those guys. Like if you take Miles Sanders, that doesn't mean you can't take James Conner, right?
Right. I like Conner more than Miles Sanders just because of where he goes in drafts. And I think we kind of overrate the fact that, oh, well, the Cardinals are going to be 1-8. They're not going to play Kyler Murray once he comes back. Like the Houston Texans, knocked the Colts out of the playoffs. Teams Lovie Smith didn't have to win that last game, but he did. NFL teams, new coaching staff, Jonathan Gannon, they're going to want to win football games if they can win football games. So they did that last year. I mean, they could have packed that whole thing in and played Jonathan Ward, and they didn't. They gave James Conner a lot of receiving work as well. So I think that's a pretty fair argument, at least to where even if we think Arizona is as bad as any team in the NFL, 4.5 over under win total, that I think they're still going to play. They're not just going to completely pack it in and play XFL guys.
Well, that's a good reason. Once again, if you want to bet the over 4.5 win total, Vegas says that team is going to lose 13 games, right? But if you think that Kyler Murray comes back and valiantly tries to fight to save his job from Caleb Williams, then bet on that, right?
Right, exactly.
But it's easier to bet. The thing is, we've seen in recent years, especially, like you pointed out, that Damian Harris was good on the Texans, that James Conner could be good on a bad Cardinals team. Why can't Miles Sanders be good on a bad Panthers team? So, and they're not even supposed to be bad. They're supposed to be middle of the pack, according to what Vegas is saying. So there's good arguments to make those bets. But at the same time, all I'm looking for in that range is the highest upside possible. And I think Miles Sanders, given the situation, is one of the few guys that does present that. That's why I'm taking. And I'll take the other guys too. And that's why I kind of like doing the old hero RB this year.
There's good people on both sides.
That's right. Well, that's what makes this fun, is that we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, in my Scott Fishbowl draft, my running backs are Miles Sanders and James Conner. And then after that, I just took like pass catching backs, Jerick McKinnon and Devin Singletary. So I'm willing to play that game. I'm not scared.
We are up against it as far as time, but I wanted to ask you guys real quick, getting into these late round options. Who do we talk about the Jalen Warrens, we talk about the Tank Bigsby's, we talk about, how these guys could, have this big upside should something happen. But what we don't talk about is in the running backs in this range, who maybe is the most questionable pick of these late round in terms of like return on investment, taking these guys around, the Jalen Warrens or Tank Bigsby's, who you don't think like, why are you going that high?
Yeah, I'm worried, honestly, and I hate saying this about Devon A-Chain because, there's so much talk about them. I'm just saying, You asked. There's so much talk around Miami bringing in Dalvin Cook. He's got some size concerns. And although he's really fast, I just don't know how much work he's going to get unless there's an injury to Raheem Mostert or Jeff Wilson, who he's going ahead of, by the way, by quite a bit. So I'm just worried not about his skill set, but just his return on investment.
Devon Achane, yeah, I mean, like he could honestly end up being a backup for Raheem Mostert. Like they could just be insurance for Mostert, who gets hurt all the time, but it could be the case that they really just want to have what they have already, and they know Mostert might get hurt, so they bring in a backup for Mostert, in which case he'd be crazy disappointing at ADP, and Mostert and Jeff Wilson would probably be values.
Right. And if I was going to pick any guy, it'd probably be Tyler Algier, just because of what we talked about with Bijan Robinson. Like, what kind of role is he really going to play? I mean, it's ambiguous in that respect, not really an ambiguous backfield, because we know they took Bijan Robinson high in the draft. But I just think that even though he is very talented, I'm still struggling to find even a receiving role for Tyler Algier. I know, like you said, we are up against it. So, Britt, did you have something here?
Well, yeah, I mean, coming up after this, I think Britt might be frozen, actually.
Yeah.
Coming up after this, stay tuned. Me and Britt are hanging around. Howard doesn't have internet today, so it's just going to be us doing the Alarm Fantasy Show. And then make sure tonight you hang around for the Tour Junkies. I really have been getting into their show. The golf is kind of fun to bet on, to fill out some DFS lineups. Tour Junkies will be previewing the Open Championship for golf betting at DFS tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern time on Better Sports. So make sure you hang out for that. That should be a good time. Kev?
Yeah, I think it's time we get out of here. I know, Britt, we said a little goodbye to a little early, but we will be back. Well, Coop and Britt will be back at the top of the hour for Alarm Fantasy Football. So for Coop, I am Kevin Tompkins, for Britt as well, obviously. And I will just leave you guys with, and I'm going to do it too, because you know what? Toodles.
Toodles.